Okay, starting. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Building Brain Fitness session with Wyndham Youth Services. My name is G, and I'm the Area Leader of Youth Support and Development. Welcome, everyone. So I just want to run through a couple of things before I introduce you to our presenter, Anthony. So the session will be recorded, but it's really only going to be recording myself and Anthony tonight. So in terms of comments or questions that you might make on our Q&A section, we won't always post the questions that you might have, but I will certainly ask those questions to Anthony just to make sure that they remain anonymous. The only part that we probably will be posting is that if you have logged in anonymously, or if you have, or we ask for a poll and you might respond, and we'll add that so it goes live for everybody else to see. So I guess without further ado, I just want to introduce Anthony Hurst, who is our presenter for tonight. Anthony is one of the youth and family counsellors at Wyndham Youth Services. He might be a familiar face to you if you've been involved in any other sessions that we have, if you've been involved in tuning into teens, or if your teen or young person has been involved in our counselling services in the past. So just bear with me as I send Anthony through to you guys. There we go.
Okay, so now I'm going to try share my slides, G, and you know our routine. You're going to tell me and double check that I've done it properly.
Sure can.
All right. Have I got it?
In one moment. Yep, it's all up, Anthony.
Beautiful. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming along for tonight. You've signed on to attend our Building Brain Fitness session. And now this is an interesting session because it was one that we were going to run in March, probably about a week and a half before we all needed to go into work from home mode. And this was meant to be a face-to-face presentation that we were going to do. And so what we have done instead is modify it obviously to run online, but I've also taken a look at some of the stuff as to how it might apply actually to the situation we are in at the moment, which is a pandemic. So before I move on into this presentation, there's a couple of things I'm going to ask of you. Now, for those of you who attended our session last week, you might be familiar with this, but I acknowledge that there's probably going to be two types of people attending tonight. There's going to be people who have had a massive day, are completely exhausted, and just want to sit back and watch the presentation. And you are very, 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 very welcome to do that. That is completely fine. I'm also aware that sometimes we have people attend who also have very big and very busy days, but are wanting to get a lot out of this session and are wanting to take some notes, are wanting to, make reference to some particular resources or books or websites or things that we mention. So if that's you, I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen or something that you can take some of these notes down, and I'll make certain comments throughout the session just to let you know. You might want to write that down. For those people who are playing at home with their extra notes, this would be a good thing for you to add to your list, and so forth there. So I'll get you to organise yourself in that way. The second thing I want you to do, just over the next 10 to 20 seconds, I want you to write in the chat what sort of topics you would like to see us presenting on in the future. And what we're going to do is we're then going to publish those ideas, and then each of you will be able to see those ideas and like them, give them a thumbs up if it's also something that you would like to see. And what I'm aiming to do with that is to look at that data that we get and then plan our future sessions for the remainder of this year and possibly into next year to align with some of those topics, so that it's not just me deciding what I think people would like to be learning about and hearing about. It's going to be based off what you're telling us you would like to know about. So I'll get you guys doing that. But while you're doing that, I'm also going to move along. So just to begin with, I'd like to start with our acknowledgement of country. So as we gather today, we acknowledge the traditional custodians on which Wyndham Council sits and on which we are meeting. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture, knowledge and hopes of Aboriginal Australia. We must remember that beneath this building, this land is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. And in addition to that, I'd also like to acknowledge that, of course, we are all in different homes and places tonight. So to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which each of us individually are joining tonight. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today? We are going to be talking about three main things. Number one, resilience. What I'm going to do with resilience, though, is I'm going to define it for you and I'm going to break it down into the 6 domains that make up resilience. So there's a fair bit of research now that's telling us actually that resilience has 6 core domains that work towards what we know as resilience. And so in order to build resilience, we need to build capacity and strength in each of those domains. I'm then going to step you through probably about one key strategy, given the time that we've got, of how we might look at building that domain. And apparently I'm going to do this in 60 minutes. So I'm historically terrible with timing. G will be able to tell you all about that. So I'm going to do my very best at keeping myself on time. We're due to finish here tonight at 7:30, and then at 7:30 you are very welcome to leave at the end of the session, but alternatively I will be hanging around for 15 minutes to answer some of the questions that were asked during the presentation. So for those who are interested, you are welcome to hang around for the extra 15 minutes. For those of you who aren't, you are very welcome to tune out. So there is a pandemic going on, and what we know is that has caused and will continue to cause a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear for a lot of people. I do not imagine that this is brand new information for anybody that is joining us here tonight. A note about our world before the pandemic. So we had 1 in 4 people who were affected by mental health disorders worldwide. That's 450 million people currently suffering from a mental illness, and specifically 260 million with depression. So I would say we don't have accurate data for what impact the pandemic has had on that. Anecdotally, the conversations I'm having with clients, with friends, with family, with other people in the community, again, I'm sure this isn't news to people signing in tonight, but I imagine that it's gotten significantly worse. What we are going to be talking about today is the idea of resilience. And what we know is that if we build resilience, we have a protection against these mental health disorders we have just spoken about. So resilience, and for our people playing at home, you might wish to write this down because this is a very good definition for us to know. Resilience is the ability to positively respond to adversity. It is important for the small things, yeah? So, back when we could drive places, traffic incidents, yeah? Someone pulls out in front of you, someone's going too slow, someone's driving past you too fast. These sorts of small things, resilience is good to help us cope with those. It's also great and important for the big stuff. Major illnesses, tragedies, loss, pandemics, all of these sorts of things that can have significant impact on our life. Low resilience means that even the smallest setbacks that we are experiencing are going to feel like disasters. They're going to feel major. And I think that what really sums up this slide here is the idea of the straw that broke the camel's back. So this idea that it can be, when we are experiencing low levels of resilience, it can be just that little bit that pushes us over the edge and can take us a very, very long time to recover. When we are experiencing high levels of resilience, however, we can bounce forward from setbacks. And we can use adversity as an opportunity to grow. So it doesn't mean that we don't struggle. It doesn't mean that we all of a sudden no longer experience adversity. In fact, highly resilient people experience adversity on a regular basis. The difference is they use these opportunities, these adversities, as opportunities to grow and bounce forward from those setbacks. So resilience really lets us stay focused on our goals. So essentially what's important to us, and it allows us to move forward. Now, why is it that I am talking to you about resilience tonight? One thing that has struck me about the research into resilience is that it's not something that you're born with. So what we know about resilience and the research that is emerging around it is that it is a skill that anybody can develop. It doesn't matter if you are a tiny person, a large person, a young person, an old person, it does not matter. Everybody can develop resilience. And what we know in particular about resilience is that it can be now broken down into these 6 domains that you see in front of you. So the remainder of this session, I'm actually going to break down each of these domains for you. And what we're really looking at here is identifying how we can flourish and how we can succeed in each of these domains of resilience. And of course, if we are doing well in each of these domains, we are experiencing high levels of resilience. And why is that a good thing? Because when adversity strikes, we are going to be able to respond to it positively and bounce forward. So well-being, we can often get these 2 words confused, the idea of well-being versus resilience. Are they the same thing or are they different? What I'm going to put to you here is that well-being is the what and the resilience is the how. So when we think about well-being, we're thinking about lots and lots of different things. So an ability to remain optimistic, to experience positive emotion, to have a sense of meaning, move towards our goals and the things that are important to us, to live in line with our values and to stick to a healthy lifestyle. This is what a state of well-being looks like. What you'll see on the left of the screen, however, is what resilience is. And when we are experiencing high levels of resilience, we are able to achieve high levels of well-being. So without resilience, we cannot experience well-being. Now, this curve here, some of you may be familiar with, and this is often referred to as the stress curve. They call it the inverted U curve, which is basically a fancy way of saying an upside down U. And what we see here is that we have stress sitting down the bottom. And as we move further and further along from boredom to overload, we see stress levels increasing. What we see along the other side of the screen is performance. And as we move from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, we see performance improving. So what we can see is that low or no levels of stress is actually pretty bad for performance. And we call that state a state of boredom. So if I have no care in the world, no bother, no stress, I'm probably not going to be performing very well. If we then move that up a bit and we have a bit of stress, but not too much stress, what we see is this state that we call productive stress. And what that does is it means that we've got some things on our plate that we need to work through, but generally we'll have a sense that we can achieve it and that we can we can manage the level of stress that we are under. So we feel confident about the level of stress that we are under. And what we see there is a state of peak performance. So when we are in a state of productive stress, we are in peak performance. What then happens though, if we become too overloaded and too high stress, what we see is that our performance dips and drops completely. So we can see essentially from this curve that not enough stress is really bad for performance. Too much stress is really bad for performance, but somewhere in the middle is just right. So I kind of think of this graph a bit like the Goldilocks graph, yeah? So it's not too cold, it's not too hot, it's got to be just right in the middle. And that's how we achieve peak performance. Now, this is very interesting. We are looking at the exact same curve here, but we now have this red line that comes in. And this red line is the performance of people who are experiencing high resilience. Now, I'll say the phrase. What we see happen with the curve, we have a flattening of the curve. I know that's a very overused statement at the moment. I promise I won't refer to the new normal or business as unusual. They're the phrases at the moment that are really triggering me that everybody keeps saying. So flattening the curve, resilience flattens the curve of peak performance. And what we see happens is, regardless of how much stress is going on along the bottom, we are able to experience peak performance across a much greater variety of situations. So even if I'm feeling bored or not stressed enough, when I'm resilient, I can still push myself to work, to achieve, to adapt. When I'm overloaded, what I also find is that I can still also perform better under high levels of stress. And in addition to that, as you can see from some of this extra text, when I'm experiencing high levels of resilience, I'm actually able to push myself back into the productive stress zone. So I'm going to have the skills and knowledge to be able to go, right, so what's going on right now that's making me overwhelmed? What are the things I need to bring into my life or get rid of from my life to stop myself being so overwhelmed? And how is it that I can get back to a state of productive stress? So resilience is very, very, very important for our ability to perform under stress. What I'm going to introduce you to right here is the prefrontal cortex. So this here, I'm not sure if you can see my face on the screen, but I'm going to go side profile. So basically what you're seeing on the screen is the same as my head. So this green bit here is the prefrontal cortex, and that sits right here. And essentially what this part of the brain is responsible for is basically all of the things that make us human. So all of the things that we can do that separate us from animals, being able to be creative, being able to being able to plan, being able to goal set, being able to strategize, all of these very, very human functions all sit right here in the prefrontal cortex. This is what we call our thinking brain, and it's responsible for helping us get through very stressful situations. The problem, however, is that when we are under stress, it is not our thinking brain that comes online. In fact, it is our limbic brain, which is this red part here, also known as our emotion brain. So this part of our brain gets activated when we are in fight-flight responses. It's responsible for adrenaline and cortisol, those molecules in our body that get our heart racing and get our body moving and get these stress responses happening. And unfortunately, paradoxically, when we need to use our thinking brain the most, they're often the times that our emotion brain gets activated. Those high stress situations activate our emotion brain and get us thinking in fight-flight responses rather than using our thinking brain to respond. So what resilience does is it gets these two parts of our brain talking to each other. It gets the thinking part and the emotion part chatting. And so the emotion part goes, well, actually, we're under a fair bit of stress at the moment. So I think I need to release some cortisol and adrenaline to really get the body moving, to really get things happening and mobilize the body to respond to this crisis. And then your thinking brain goes, yeah, look, that's a really good idea. That might help get me through this moment right here, right now. But I also need to think up a plan long term, because if I'm experiencing high levels of adrenaline, cortisol, and stress, that's going to have a really negative impact on my mental health. So our thinking brain's going to go, right, so I need to come up with a plan about how I'm going to get us out of this. What sort of logical solutions can I put in place to help fix this situation? The problem is, if we are not highly resilient, these two parts of our brain are not able to talk to each other. And that is what happens when we experience really poor mental health. It's because our brain, our two important brain structures, our thinking brain and our emotion brain, are not able to properly talk to each other. So what is it that resilience does? Resilience builds connection between these two parts of the brain. Now, what building connection means is that both of those parts of our brain can work together and talk to each other to come up with the best solution. So it's not all emotion all the time. It's not all, let me slow down and let me think about things, because sometimes we just need to respond really quickly, right? So essentially, when we build resilience through the 6 domains that I'm about to go through with you, what happens is that our brain is able, the two key parts of our brain are able to talk to each other and communicate and help get us through adverse situations. Okay, so we're now going to look at the 6 domains of resilience. I have given you a fair bit of neuroscience there. What I'm going to say is, if that seemed a bit too much for 7 o'clock at night, that's okay. You don't need to focus on that too much, okay? I give you that because if you want to know more about the neuroscience, that can be something that's really interesting to look at. If you just trust me and you just want to listen to some of the ideas about practical things you can do, then that's completely okay. And you can pay attention now, and we're going to go through this. So these are our 6 domains again of resilience. Let's take a closer look. Our first domain of resilience is health. So for people playing at home, write that one down. Health is the foundational domain of resilience. When I'm experiencing poor physical health, my mental health and my resilience is going to suffer. Okay, so we see health as being the foundation and base of resilience. If our health is off, our resilience is off. Now, I know this because when I get a terrible night's sleep, I am not resilient the next day. The smallest thing can happen and I become dysregulated. I struggle to manage it. I struggle to concentrate. I struggle to think through very simple problems. Yeah, I come up with some projects that I'm working on at work that normally I would be able to just go, oh yeah, I'll do this. But in that moment, if my physical health is not taken care of, I'm going to find it hard to concentrate. I'm going to find it hard to problem solve, and I'm going to find it hard to be my most resilient self. So let's take a look at what health includes. Health is not just for our body. So it's very great and very important to have a healthy body, but a healthy body supports our brain. So it's really important that we value taking care of our body as not just taking care of our body, but also taking care of our mind. I'm going to introduce you to a molecule here. So for our people playing at home, you might want to write this down. It is called BDNF, and that is an abbreviation for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. For those of you that are interested, it is very well worth having a Google and looking up some of the information about this molecule in our brain. It is fascinating. What does this molecule do? What it does is, number one, it facilitates what we call neural connection. So that is these two parts of our brain, our thinking brain and our emotion brain I introduced you to earlier. BDNF helps the two of those connect and talk to each other. It increases plasticity. So there is this idea in our brain that we call it plastic. So essentially, our brain can be stretched and changed and adapt over time to do the things that we need it to do. And ultimately, a plastic brain is one that is resilient and one that can adapt. What BDNF also does is increases our ability to learn and our ability to retain information. So this is going to be something that's particularly important for our young people. They're often studying for very, very long periods of time at school. So BDNF is very important for them, for their brains to be able to cultivate. And of course, BDNF is critical for adaptation or adapting to change, which we might consider to be resilience. So let's get to the point. How is it that we increase BDNF? Okay, I'm not going to give you some big Instagram fitspiration speech. All I'm going to ask of you is this: 4 times a week of exercise, 20 minutes per occasion. It can be aerobic or weights. And essentially, if you can get to the point that you're panting, that is going to be good, okay? So we want it to be something that actually tires the body, and that's going to help stimulate this BDNF creation. The other thing that we know is, unfortunately, and I know my heart cries for this too because I love my ice cream, connoisseur cookies and cream is my life. However, less sugar is also very important. So the more sugar we consume, it actually impacts on the ability for BDNF to be created in the brain. Additionally, spending quality time with people, isn't this fascinating? Spending quality time with people assists that molecule of BDNF to be created in the brain, as well as getting quality sleep. So we know that if we're not sleeping properly, I mean, look, I didn't always know the science behind it, or the neuroscience rather, but what I absolutely did know was that when I do not sleep, I find it really difficult to roll with the punches of the day in front of me. So, you know, when I learned about BDNF, that really connected for me and really made sense. So what we're really focusing on here in this domain is 3 things: exercise, nutrition, and sleep. So exercise. We know very clearly through the research, there are lots of ways that exercise benefit our brain. It can be protective for certain neurodegenerative diseases. It improves neural network efficiency. Now, that's a really fancy way. When I say, oh, this part of our brain talking to this part of our brain, that's neural connection and this neural network efficiency. It's basically, if this part of the brain wants to talk to this part of the brain, how quickly, effectively, and efficiently can it do it? Exercise also increases connectivity with the brain. So again, how these different parts talk to each other, it helps us think faster, reduce mistakes, and makes our memory better as well. In terms of nutrition, again, there's a lot here to suggest that obviously nutrition is going to impact a lot of what goes on in our brain. The main point I want to draw your attention to here is that sugar and fatty foods will reduce BDNF in the brain. So when we have those really high sugar, high fat foods that we're consuming on a regular basis, they're going to basically reduce our ability to be resilient. I know, my heart cries. Sleep. So lack of quality sleep reduces BDNF. We know this, we've spoken about this already, but also lack of sleep also increases our cortisol levels in the body. Now, when our cortisol levels are higher, basically cortisol is a molecule in the body that readies our body for our fight-flight response and readies our body for the emotion brain to completely take over. And often what we find is we don't want that to happen. We want our thinking brain to be able to stay in charge so that it can help us think out the problems in front of us. It's important that we get a high quality sleep. And I don't know if anyone else gets this, but when I've got a crap sleep happening, what's the kind of foods that I go for? Yes, you better believe it. It's the sugary and fatty ones. So of course, there are interrelationships here all over. That is our first domain done. That was health, physical health as the first domain. What we are talking about here now is vision. So vision is what we probably consider to be the most important domain of resilience. And what we can think about is when we are at our most positive, it is usually when we have, firstly, clear goals. Clear goals are so important for vision and so important for us to be able to have something to work towards. If we think back to our definition of resilience, and I really recommend that for people playing at home that are taking their notes, to write down that definition of resilience, to respond to adversity positively. What's really important is, how do we know what a positive response to resilience is if we do not have goals that we are chasing? It is very hard to bounce back and bounce forward if we do not know what it is that we're bouncing towards, if we do not have something that we're working towards. So it is very important that we have clear goals, but it's not just important to have goals, yeah? We need to be actively pursuing those goals. And I think that probably most of us might be able to reflect on a time in our lives where we've had some goals about where we've wanted to go or wanted to be, and then had a moment where we've sort of felt like we haven't actually been working towards that and felt really flat and really disappointed. So it's not just enough to have the goals, we need to be actively working towards them. The next thing that we need to be doing is seeing results in line with those goals. Now, this can be tricky, right? Because sometimes we go, well, I'm working towards this goal, but nothing's coming of it. So what we often need to do here is be very creative in terms of what we see as results. So it may not, in some cases, you know, if we're thinking about work, results might be something like money, and you know, the kind of salary perhaps that we attract for a job, but it might also be completion of projects. It might also be the kind of feedback that we get from staff around us about how we're going. It might also be little mini challenges that we set ourselves. In addition to that, our thoughts and actions do not conflict with our goals, okay? So it's really important that not only do we have goals, not only are we pursuing them, and not only are we seeing results, but that what I'm working towards is not preventing me from accessing and following up on other goals that we've got. So, I can think of, a really silly example for myself around where I was saving, trying really, really hard to save money for, this tiny shoebox apartment I now have. And, really, really working really hard to save money for that. But then also really, 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 really wanting to go for a holiday. Is this a Gen Y problem or what? And really kind of really struggling around that, because I was going, well, I actually can't do both of these things, yeah? So I've either got to pick one or the other, because if I'm saving for a holiday, I'm all of a sudden not saving for this apartment. And if I'm saving for the apartment, I'm not saving for the holiday. So really kind of sitting back and having a think to myself to go, well, what is it that I really want to be pursuing here, and making a decision? And alas, it was the shoebox apartment with the, my lovely kitchen / living room / dining room / entertainment area that I love very much, and that I'm sitting in right now. Now, what I often think is really important in terms of vision is which goals we actively pursue. So I like to think of goal setting, and I know this is spoken about a lot, but I think I talk about it a little bit differently, and you'll be able to let me know in the comments if I'm not. But what I think is really important is that we actually have a large number and large range of goals. And this actually means that we need to sit down and create all of these. A large number of short-term goals. So these might be goals that we could achieve perhaps within, say, 1 to 2 months. Mid-term goals that might take, closer to 6 months or a bit over, and long-term goals that would be something that would probably need to be working at for at least a year, if not longer. And what we need to have is a really decent piggy bank of a whole bunch of those different goals. And what we see happening in the middle is that we then need to sort of cherry pick and drag and drop over what the goals that we're actively going to pursue and actively work towards. Now, why that is important is because when adversity strikes, when situations change and when plans change, and I think the pandemic has been a lovely example of that. I think, I've been working with a lot of people who have been, saying to me they had holiday plans, that they were going to go away. They had so many different plans that have now been put off because of the pandemic, and how disappointing that's been for them. And so some of the work that we've been looking at doing is going, well, okay, so, I mean, these plans are here now. This pandemic is here now, and that means that these goals you've been actively pursuing, well, they're just not ones that can be achieved right now, which is really disappointing and makes sense why this situation is having such a strong impact on you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those goals and we're going to put them back on the bookshelf. We're not going to forget about them. We are, know this holiday is very important to you. We know that this other thing going on is very important to you. So we're not going to forget about them. We're just going to put them on the bookshelf. And we're going to go into our piggy bank of our other short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. What are some of the other things that you wanted to do or wanted to achieve that might now be possible given we are in the pandemic? And for a lot of people I've been working with, some of the things that have come up are a whole bunch of home projects that they've wanted to do for years, but have always just had other more important things come up. Yeah. So, I've wanted to paint this or renovate this or do this or just move this stuff around or clear this room out or do all these different things that I've just never had time to do. But all of a sudden have now found that they do have that time, or very rarely get to sit down as a whole group and a whole family to have meals together, yet have now gone, oh, actually, I might be able to spend a lot more time finding out about what's going on for the different people in the home around me. So basically recategorizing and prioritizing some of the goals we've got can be really important. Okay, our third domain. So this one is reasoning. And what this really looks at is how well are we able to use our thinking brain to respond to change. Now, what I think is going to be really critical for reasoning is being able to visualize challenges and visualize successes. So this is a very simple concept. And what's important here is that we are able to imagine something that could possibly go wrong in our mind, and then think about what we would do to try and remedy that or fix that or resolve that situation. So that's a really nice way for us to be resilient in advance. And I'm going to give you an example. Sitting around me today, I have 2 laptops, because just in case something happens with this one, I'm jumping straight onto that one. I also have this presentation on both computers and a USB, just in case something else happens in the background. Because in my head, when I sit back and I go, so what are all the possible things, Anthony, you can do to stuff up this presentation tonight? I came up with a lovely long list. And these were ones that I pictured in my head and thought, well, this is something that I can take action on and I can do something about these particular things happening. So I'm going to be jumping through some of this, and a big part of that's just because I'm looking at the time. I've got G. I'm picturing G going, "Come on, Anthony, get on with it, move along." So these slides are essentially going through what I've spoken about there, imagining some of these situations and thinking about if we were to visualize it as happening now, how would we feel? How would we react? What would be the impact in the next week, the next year, the next 5 years? And that can often help us put things into perspective. And the 3 actions that we really want to think about are: 1, can I prevent it? Okay, so is there anything I can do to prevent this? Number 2, is there anything I can do to minimize risk? And if all else fails, how can I make room to accept this situation and this outcome for what it is if it does happen? Okay, so we're now moving into composure, which, look, I'm not a mathematician. I'm going to say I think this is our 4th. Now, composure, we've just spoken about reasoning, which is all about our thinking brain and keeping our thinking brain online. Now we're talking about composure, which is all about our emotion brain. And this is about how is it that we can remain cool, calm, collected, and in control when we're feeling very emotionally activated. So I wanted to kind of point this out because quite often when we talk about being calm, we think that that means not worrying, not caring about risks and consequences, and not, like as if we're just being very aloof. And I know that I've certainly been criticised of this in the past, that sometimes when things happen, I can just be I can come across as not really caring or not being mindful enough about the risks. But what we find is being calm is actually very important. So even though it can feel wrong to be calm in such adverse situations, it's actually very important. Being calm does not mean you are complacent, and being calm does not mean that you don't care, despite often what we hear from other people around us. Using calmness, if we can remain calm and tame our emotion brain, we're going to be able to engage our thinking brain much better and be able to respond to the situation around us in a logical and carefully thought out way. And what that's going to mean is that we're probably much more likely to experience successful outcomes and successful coping and successful adaptation. So what are some ways that we can keep ourselves composed? I've got a few techniques here. So the first one is sipping water and mindful eating. So this is why I always keep my little water bottle with me. And basically why this one works is our brains are wired, back from when we were in hunter-gatherer days. And so what would happen is basically the question our brain asks ourselves, when our brain's deciding, should I be calm or should I be fully escalated and fully emotional? Our brain asks a question, which is, am I currently in life-threatening danger? And so one of the ways that we can convince our brain that we are not in life-threatening danger is by slowly sipping water and slowly snacking on food, okay? This is why that bag of chips usually cracks out for me on a Friday night after a big work week, salt and vinegar, crinkle cut, because that slow snacking just helps. It's a thing. It's not a good thing. I'm not recommending it, but it is a thing, because what it does is, essentially, when we are snacking slowly or slowly sipping water, our brain asks, right, would I be slowly sipping water or slowly eating if there was a saber-toothed tiger standing right in front of me? And of course, the answer is no. If there was a saber-toothed tiger in front of me, I'd be running, I'd be doing something quite physical with my body and quite quick and responsive. So when we do these two strategies here, it actually our body convinces our brain that we're actually not under threat. So, if we think about exams and things like that, really good to be taking, some water in, that slow sips can happen. It's not about being thirsty. It's really just about convincing our brain we're not under threat. Diaphragmatic breathing. So for our people playing at home that are taking notes, I recommend writing that term down, as well as the next point, which is progressive muscle relaxation. You are able to jump on YouTube and Google some wonderful short clips that show you how to do diaphragmatic breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. These are fantastic body-based strategies that help down-regulate and de-escalate the brain. So essentially, diaphragmatic breathing involves tummy breathing, in for 4 counts, holding for a couple counts, and out for 4 counts. Sometimes the counts can be different. So some people like breathing in for maybe a couple more or a couple less counts than that. So different videos you'll see will tell you different things, and that's okay. But to really look at employing these strategies, because they are the best things to help us down-regulate. Often I think in therapy, people talk a lot about, oh, well, I can challenge my thoughts, or maybe I can do mindfulness or things like that. Mindfulness and challenging our thoughts are fantastic strategies, but they do not work when we are highly escalated and highly emotional, because that mindfulness and thought challenging are all in our thinking brain here. If we are all emotion brain, all escalated over here, we need body-based things like breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and our sipping of water to help out. So I really recommend looking into those strategies there. Collaboration. So this, I think, is our fifth domain. So we only have one more left after that. Collaboration is really around the importance of this is about connecting with people around us. So that could be, for example, friends, family, and our community, but also professional supports like a psychologist, social worker, counsellor, a mentor, a critical friend, people that are able to provide us meaningful human connection. So why is it that it's important for us to connect? Well, in fact, connection is a psychological need. So attachment to other people is actually the first need that our brain has when we are born into this world. So there's a very, very important part of infant development where the infant becomes connected to a primary caregiver. And in fact, there are parts of the brain that flourish and require connecting with other people. So the fusiform gyrus and the mirror neurons rely on us being able to look at each other, make eye contact, see each other's faces and connect in that way. That brings them online and stimulates them and assists us with things like understanding, compassion, and meaningful connection. You know, I think a lot of us have probably received, you know, emails in our time that have seemed, you know, maybe particularly pointed or things like that. And we need to be mindful that our online communication is fraught with disaster often because we miss a lot of the tone and all of the extra cues that we get. But what we also know is that at this time, connection is more important than it's ever been. And we need to be thinking about how is it that we can do this differently to respond to the times that we are in. So there's a whole bunch of new tools that have come through around how it is that we can be communicating with each other. And it's important that we find something that we can use, some sort of tool. It could be an application like we've listed here, or in line with restrictions, it could be catching up with the specified number of people in a park or in an open outdoor area where that might be able to happen. Really what we've got to do is make sure that connection is still happening. I think the other important thing to think about here is that the role that professional supports can play. So like I mentioned in terms of, psychology, counselling and social work, as well as, a range of other, really lovely and helping professions. These supports are available. And in fact, for people over the age of 12 that have a connection to Wyndham, our counselling team, including myself, we are able to provide counselling to young people and their immediate family members, as well as broader community members of Wyndham through making a referral at this link here. And I believe that one of my colleagues will be posting this link into the chat if any of you would like to do that. It's super quick to get in touch with us via this link. I think people tell me it takes them all of about 2 minutes to fill it out. It's just about giving us some basic information so we can get in touch and then start, having some counselling sessions with you. We do have a few parameters around that. So there's some different sort of levels of support that are open to different members of the community, but particularly for young people and their immediate family members. So 12 to 25 is how we classify young people, and their immediate family members, we can offer up to 10 sessions of free counselling. So always good to know about that. I believe that this might be our very last domain, and I haven't looked at the time, so I'm not sure how I'm going, but I'm going to think that if I'm going terribly, G would have kicked me off by now. So tenacity is really about persistence, bouncing forward, and having a sense of realistic optimism. Persistence is important, and in fact, the research tells us that persistence is more important to achieving our goals than intelligence. And I think we probably know that from a lot of the people that we associate ourselves with. We can probably identify someone who's really, 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 really smart, but then for one reason or another, has someone else that performs better. And it could be because of this factor of persistence. You know, there's this lovely quote from Einstein here. It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. And this was very much Einstein's perspective on his own successes, that it was really about persistence that got him there. And the way that we be tenacious, the way that we stay persistent, is that we let the thinking brain guide motivation, not the emotion brain. Now, what I mean by that is we consciously choose the directions, the decisions, and the choices that we want to make. And what we can do is we can be very sneaky. This is me, I always want the easy way out. And we can reward ourselves for doing this. Okay, and when we reward ourselves for doing things that are constructive and useful, we actually get to condition our own mind. I won't go into the neuroscience of dopamine for you today. I simply don't have the time. But if we give ourselves mini rewards when we do something useful or constructive, we get dopamine hits in our brain, which actually conditions our brain to be more likely to do those things. So giving ourselves little rewards to coax us along can often be a really good way to get us going. You know, I know in terms of my exercise, I bought myself a little bag of Freddos, and every time I do like a 40 to 60 minute workout, I give myself a Freddo. And I feel like that's kind of counterintuitive, but I feel like I certainly would have burnt more calories in that 40 to 60 minutes than the Freddo. So I think hopefully there's some dopamine hits happening there, and eventually I'll be able to do the exercise without the Freddo. But in the meantime, I'm very much enjoying the Freddo. Realistic optimism is also very important. I think that optimism can get a bit of a bad rap. People think that being optimistic means that you're just like one of these people that walks around like this all day and thinks that nothing bad ever happens and everything is only ever good. And what we know is that that's actually not what optimism is at all. And that's what's led to this term realistic optimism. And so again, this might be a nice term to write down because there's some lovely research around it. And what we find is that actually people who are overly optimistic, unrealistically optimistic, they actually find that their motivation is sapped. It's actually not helpful for you. However, having a realistic sense of optimism makes it much easier to persevere, because it's about that acknowledgement of before even starting something going, I'm aware there's going to be setbacks, but that's okay. I'm going to get through it. And it's really funny because like, I know for me, I tend to have a very happy-go-lucky attitude. Like I go, oh, I'm going to do this. And people kind of go to me, oh, but don't, have you thought that through? Have you thought that through? Have you thought that through? And in their defense, sometimes I actually haven't thought some of those things through. But in a lot of cases, I go, oh, yeah, that'll probably be pretty crap. But, you know, that's life, right? There's going to be those things that pop up. And whatever it is that does come up, we'll just respond to it, get through it, keep going. And so this realistic sense of optimism is really, really important. And what we find through rewarding ourselves, through building that realistic sense of optimism, we're actually building discipline. And what happens when we can build discipline is that doing things that we don't necessarily want to do becomes much, much easier. And it really challenges this notion. You know, I feel like when I first sort of looked at this material, I went, oh, what? You know, this idea that, oh, but I just don't have any motivation to exercise. And I remember someone saying to me, oh, but that's okay. You actually don't need to feel motivated. You just need to get up and do it. And I was like, oh, okay, that was a bit direct. But also I kind of went, yeah, like actually maybe I don't need to feel like doing it. Maybe I just need to do it. And that, I don't know, maybe that's just another really Gen Y thing of me. But, you know, it's really powerful when we do get this discipline built, because there's almost this self-efficacy, this kind of idea that we go, oh yeah, I actually can do tough things and I can push through tough situations. And that in and of itself is great for our tenacity, because of course, what is it that helps us push through tough times? When we go, oh, do you know what, this is crap, but I remember this other thing that happened 5 years ago, and that was even crapper, or that was way tougher than this, or that was also a really, really difficult situation, and I got through that. So I can absolutely get through this. Building discipline is really the gift that keeps on giving, as is tenacity. So there we have it. We have our 6 domains. We started off with health. We then went and spoke about vision. I think after that we went to reasoning, which was really talking about our thinking brain, and then we went to composure, which is really about how to regulate our emotion brain. We then spoke about collaboration and the importance of connecting with other people, but also reaching out for additional professional supports like psychologists, social workers, and counsellors when necessary. And then lastly, we just finished on tenacity. So that importance of persistence, realistic optimism, and discipline. Okay, now it is question time. Oh, it's 7:25. I am killing it. G, I have finished on time.
You have done very well, Anthony. So one of the questions that we have here is, would love to know how we can give little rewards without eating the whole bag of Freddos on the first achievement. And I mentioned that you clearly love your food, which is why you're talking about Freddos and ice cream, but maybe some other rewards that doesn't involve chocolate.
yeah, absolutely. I know one that's also been really good for me. I'm not sure exactly if we'd call it again one of the best strategies, but for me as well, like I think, how much time am I giving myself for things like sitting on my phone or watching Netflix, so, is it that for every 10 minutes of exercise that I do I give myself, 20 minutes of TV time, or is it that if I, what else might I do? Oh, do you know what else I love? I love my sleep-ins on weekends. So is it that if I do something, like do my 20 minutes of exercise, do I give myself, a half-hour sleep in or a 10-minute sleep in or things like that? I think it's about really finding things that we enjoy doing that maybe we just do just cause, and going, actually, do you know what? If I want to do that thing, I'm going to have to earn it. Because I think at the moment we're very, not specifically right now, but we're very good at treat myself. And so what might be a really good idea is to go, okay, so if I do really well at this, what's something I would normally treat myself to that I can then give myself as a reward that I would possibly just do for myself, regardless? Can I now incorporate that as a as a little incentive? If there's some sort of product or something that you that you really like buying or something like that, maybe you can set that as a bit of a reward for yourself. If it's something that you would normally just get just because you like it, go, do you know what? I'm only going to get myself that once I've done X, Y, Z.
Thank you, Anthony. Another question is, my young person has low resilience. How do we help build it up?
Yeah, great. So there's a couple things here. So resilience is built every single day. And often what happens is we wait until a problem occurs or a crisis occurs or adversity hits, and then we go, oh, we need to build resilience. We need to build resilience. We need to build resilience. And that's in fact not the way that resilience is built. So the research is very clear that resilience is best built in advance, and it's best built by daily tasks, day in and day out. So what often works really well in this space is if you look at different domains that we've spoken about today, and G, I believe that this presentation will go online as well, so people will be able to go back and look through it on our Wyndham Together website. But if you look at the domains that we've spoken about, what you can do is you can, spend some time to get creative and think, so what are some ways that I can build physical health, for example? And I know one strategy we had on the slide was that for this molecule BDNF, 20 minutes of exercise 4 times a week. So that could be something that gets built into the week to start helping someone to build resilience. Now, for some people, 20 minutes 4 times a week might be nothing. For others, if you do no exercise whatsoever during a week, you might start by doing, say, two 20-minute sessions or something like that. So I think through going back and possibly rewatching this presentation, because you know what, I gave you guys a lot of information and a lot of content. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go back over some of the notes that you've taken, or go back over and rewatch this presentation, because thinking creatively about how you can understand what those domains are and try and implement and incorporate them. I mean, another intuitive one under health might be just trading in and out some of the different foods that we're eating, if you're able to. I think under composure, we gave some examples like progressive muscle relaxation and diaphragmatic breathing. And so being able to sort of practice particularly progressive muscle relaxation a few times a week could be a brilliant way to develop high resilience. But the research is very clear. It's not something that you can do in a day. It's something that needs to be built day in and day out. And what they say is that, essentially even only 3 or 4 minutes a day of doing something resilience based within this model is enough to improve resilience over time.
Great, thank you, Anthony. There's lots of questions coming through, and there's lots of suggestions coming through for rewards, which our wonderful moderators will put through into the chat. So thanks for the suggestions, guys.
Right.
So one of the other questions is, how does one take a step back to process when highly stressed? How do we better guide our teens if monkey see isn't monkey do?
How do we better guide our teens if monkey see isn't monkey do? Is that suggesting, is there, G, do you think, a bit of a question there around, if I'm struggling to compose myself, how is it that I can assist my teens?
Yeah, I guess I would take it that way as well. And I guess the second part to that is, how can you take a step back to process when you're in an escalated state, I guess.
Yeah, wonderful. So our tuning into teens parenting programs that we run, I think we do some lovely work around this. I think we spend a whole week working with our parents around what are some strategies they can put in place, to put their own oxygen mask on before being able to do that for their children. We know that that's the case. Parents, carers, family members are often so far under the pump. It can be really often difficult to take care of ourselves in that time. So I think one thing that I would really recommend there is diaphragmatic breathing. So that was written on one of the slides. It is spelled DIAPHRAGATIC breathing. And what I would really recommend on that is to go on YouTube and type that in. And there will be lots of really great tutorials where people teach you how to do that breathing. And as someone who has previously experienced panic attacks, when I was a teenager myself, that I found was one of the only things that really worked to prevent me from going into that panic mode and to down escalate and down regulate my body. And indeed, as an adult working in the mental health field now, I know that the research backs that. So when we are able to control our breathing, that can actually help de-escalate the entire emotional response of our body. But again, it's not about getting to, it's sort of like riding a bike, right? You don't try to ride the bike for the first time entering a BMX competition. You've got to practice these skills in the lead up way beforehand. So it's really good when we are feeling quite good and in a great place to be practicing things like diaphragmatic breathing, because then when we need to use it, it's going to be second nature to us. Where I think a lot of people struggle is they get some of these strategies down and then they go, right, if I, start to struggle, I'm going to try use that. and then for whatever reason they struggle to do that, and then go, oh, that strategy doesn't work. So I think it's going to be really important to be implementing some of those strategies prior to needing them, so that when the time comes, you'll be able to confidently use it.
That's great. Thank you, Anthony. I've got another one for you. This one is, should we try to build up all 6 domains of resilience, or just focus on the ones that we're good at? I think it's a great question.
That is a fantastic question, and I love that. So there's a couple of ways that I would suggest here. And what I would say is that there's no one size fits all. So I do a fair bit of, or have done a fair bit of coaching in terms of, there's a way that we can sort of get people's resilience profiles and do some coaching around that. And there's a couple things. So one thing that we find is that people will often have a priority area. So an area that maybe is their lowest area that they can work on to develop. And that is probably going to be quite tricky for them to, you know, consistently work at. But what we find is the gains happen quite quickly when doing that. However, alternatively, what we also would be looking at is, and I think for some of these domains, often we can sort of look at them and go, oh, actually, I kind of think I do that domain pretty okay. This other domain, I think, is a letdown for me. And what you would have gathered probably from my presentation is that health is usually a letdown for me. So as soon as I become stressed out or overworked, my diet goes to crap, my sleep goes to crap, and I stop exercising. That just automatically happens for me. That's my pattern. And so, but what I know is really strong for me is my vision. I always have, you know, very clear goals that keep me going. And I also think my tenacity. So to just keep working, keep pumping, keep doing what I've got to do to get where I want to be. And so even at times where I'm struggling where my resilience might be struggling because my health might not be going so well, for example, the other thing that I can do is think, well, what are my strengths? How can I use my goals and my vision and my tenacity to push me through this? And that can also be quite helpful. So what I would say is that it's not necessarily one or the other. I think it's probably that and. So you can work at looking at, you know, really harnessing your strengths, but then if you also recognize that you know, there's a particular area that requires improvement, I would go, you know what, there's probably going to be some things to put in place there as well.
Great, thank you so much, Anthony. We've got one more question. How to encourage your team to keep going, just to push a little bit harder?
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm going to recommend there, I believe the book is by Carol Dweck, and I think it's called Mindset. Now, you don't necessarily need to buy the book. It is a good read, but you should be able to Google some stuff on this. Basically, what we talk about in mindset is there is a difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset about a problem says basically, well, I just am what I am. I'm as good as what I'm going to be at whatever the task at hand is. You know, I'm just average at maths. Maths is not my strength. So I'm going to be getting, you know, C's and D's, and that's just how it is. It doesn't matter how hard I work. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is the more and more and more and more effort that I put in, the better and better and better I'm going to do. And they've actually done a lot of studies that have shown that achievement and resilience is much higher in people that have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And there's a lovely strategy I think I can even get across in about 10 seconds, which is what Carol Dweck, I believe it's Carol Dweck, I could be wrong.
You've got it right, Anthony. I just posted it in our chat.
Lovely. I love it when I'm right. It doesn't happen very often. Often I know things, but just not really sure where I know them from, but that's okay. And what she talks about is the power of the word yet. So someone says, I can't do it. And then the caregiver, the parent, the adult says, yet. You feel like you can't do it yet. And what we see is that that really changes the whole narrative of the situation, which is like, yeah, yet. And what yet implies is that in the future you will. So it goes from that definitive can't do it to the I may be able to do it in the future. So there's some really lovely language tools that we as parents and adults and caregivers can start integrating into our language too. And I'd really encourage that. I think it works really, really well.
Thank you, Anthony. I believe, I'll just do a quick double check, but I believe that is our final question for the evening. We've just put the name of Carol Dweck onto the chat, so you'll be able to access that. And that is all the questions that we have today. I just want to thank you, Anthony, for another great session. I'm sure we will get some feedback coming soon. Again, I just wanted to, I might just pop myself in there for a second, Anthony. I'm going to kick you out.
Yes.
So I just want to encourage everyone to please send us an email or comment on this chat, just letting us know if there's any particular topics that you would like us to present on in future. And also please, if you have any other questions that pop up later tonight or tomorrow or in future weeks, please don't hesitate to send us an email at tuningintoteens@wyndham.vic.gov.au, or you can just give us a call at the Youth Resource Centre. One of our lovely moderators will put those details in our chat. I also, just before I hand it back to you, Anthony, I just want to do a quick thank you to a few people in the background that you will not see. So we've got Rosie, who is our youth counsellor, who's been answering some of your questions. We've got Tanya, who's our senior youth support officer, who's also been responding to some of your questions. And we've got Hayley, who's the youth development officer, again, who's been responding to some of your questions. There's a lot of work that happens in the background. So I want to thank them for their support. And we've also got Bronwyn from our IT department, who's been super helpful tonight to make sure that this runs smoothly. So thank you to everyone. And I'll leave it to you, Anthony, to finish it off.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, G. And again, yes, I would also like to say thank you to everybody else that's helped. I've literally done nothing but get on the screen. Everyone else has done actually everything else. So they have done a brilliant job. How I would just finish up will be to say that this presentation is eventually going to make it onto our Wyndham Together website, this recording. And so what I would really recommend is that, well, number one, if you would like to go back and rewatch it, you're welcome to. But something we really encourage in our community is that if this is something that you found useful, to really pay it forward and let your friends and your family members and other people know about it. I know that we do a lot of work in terms of like the parenting space and caregiver space with Tuning Into Teens and a few of our other programs that we run. And often some of the feedback that we get is that, people say, oh, look, I wish I knew about this earlier, or, I wish someone else had sort of told me about it, or things like that. And it can be a really nice way to open the conversation to go, yeah, actually, it is okay to sign up and get some extra tips and strategies around, how to be a part of the family and how to support young people and support yourself. So really, really recommend that. Other than that, thank you all for tuning in. We've kept you for about 15 minutes over time. Hope you found today useful, and tonight useful, actually, sorry. And look forward to catching you all again.